It's a rainy, moody day, and I think it's a perfect moment to go for a walk into the forest and take some photos. Now, today I decided to photograph with the 50mm lens. This was a lens that I hated a lot when I used to use it with my DSLR, but since I got my mirrorless, my Canon EOS R, this lens became one of my favorite lenses. And during this video I'll tell you why. I'll share some tips on how I photograph with this lens, my ideas on this lens. Hey everyone, my name is Toma, Phototom here on YouTube. This channel is all about landscape and travel photography, so if you're interested in this kind of topics, make sure to subscribe for more similar videos. And also, if you want to watch my instructional videos or join me for one of my workshops, there's a link in the description of this video and you find all the details there on my website. On this road I also come with my mountain bike, and I was thinking maybe I should do a series, landscape photographer on a mountain bike exploring the landscape. I don't know, it could be interesting. It's a lot difficult to photograph and film these vlogs. I have to carry a lot of gear on a mountain bike. Now let's get back to the topic from today. And the first reason I'm using a 50mm lens, or I like using a 50mm or I like using a 50mm lens from time to time, is that it gives me the freedom because of the fact that it's a fast lens. I'm photographing at 2.8 or 2.2, and it gives me the freedom to photograph without a tripod. It's also almost the equivalent of the field of view of my eye, but not including the peripheral vision. So it's a nice way to photograph exactly what I'm seeing. And right now I'm seeing something very interesting over here. The road that goes into the distance, there's a little bit of light over there, and the trunks of the trees are really dark because they're wet, and I'm pretty sure they're going to look really well in the photo. As usual, I'm placing myself in an area of darkness that I'm photographing towards the light. And in this case, I'm using the black trunks of the trees to guide the attention of the viewer. It's an interesting frame over here. In terms of settings, I'm at 320th of a second, f2.5, ISO 320. I just want to make sure none of the photos are moved or shaky. I'm focusing in the background because I'm using an open aperture, and you have to accept the fact that you're going to have some elements that are not going to be in focus. The eye, the attention is always going into the background, and that's why I'm focusing there. Seems that I have a little bit of sun through the trees, and that's not good for forest landscape photography, but we'll have to wait and see what is happening. Now, I did a photo with this framing. I had this tree to the left and these bushes to my right, something like this. I'll show you the photo, and the settings for that photo are 160th of a second f2.5 and ISO 320. During rainy days, the forest looks really good. The leaves are saturated, the green is dark green, and it looks really good. It helps having a polarizer. I don't have one on my 50mm lens, but the feeling that you're having in the forest when it's a rainy day, it's something special. You have to be there to understand it, but if you're going to try it for yourself, I'm pretty sure you're gonna love the experience. Now let's see what other shots I can get. But if the sun is starting to shine through the trees, and I'll have to find some different ways to photograph the forest. I think over here we have an interesting opportunity. We have some wet cobblestones, and it's not a reflection, but it's kind of like a reflection. So we're gonna try and use that in the shot. I used the shininess as a leading line, and I tried to place the background ending of the photo over there at the end of the road, slightly to my right. So I'm beginning the photo to the left, lower left, with the shininess, and I'm taking the attention of the viewer to the upper right side of the photo. Settings 500 of a second, 2.5 aperture, and 320 ISO. I did a landscape composition and also a portrait composition, and I think they both have a unique feeling. So another tip would be, after you're doing a landscape composition, it's a good moment to try and experience or experiment with a portrait composition also, because you never know how the mood is changing. Because the point of view, when you change the point of view and the way you're framing stuff, you change the way people see the landscape, and that is very important. Another reason I really like photographing with the 50mm lens is, usually I'm photographing with lenses that they don't show what I'm seeing. In a way, I have to imagine, or I have to know exactly what the lens will make the landscape look like. For example, I'm looking with my eye, then I'm photographing with the 17mm or the 200mm lens. Well, the landscape changes in that moment, and with a 50mm, it's not changing that much. So it's completely sunny. So the only thing that I think I can do is to show you several photos that I did before the sun came up, and to talk about those photos. It was getting pretty sunny in the forest, and whenever you have that much sun into the forest, it becomes a little difficult to photograph. Now, after this short session in the studio where I'm going to talk about few other photos that I did, I will also switch back to the forest and share with you a tip on what are the things that I'm photographing when there's so much sun into the forest. Now, before the sun was breaking through the clouds, I had the chance to take a few more photos. And usually when I'm in the forest in a moment like this, when it's cloudy and the light is really diffuse, and I'm photographing with the 50mm lens, I'm trying to create a separation, and that separation is created from areas of blurriness and sharpness. So I'm using the open aperture of the lens to enhance that feeling of depth by focusing in the distance using an open aperture of 2.5, 2.8, 2.2 maybe, and having those layers as a visual cue if you want. The other thing that I'm doing is to search for kind of like an S shape, because it becomes more dynamic. It's a much more powerful leaning line. If you have a straight line, it's okay, and you have to take it into diagonal like I did with those reflections on the cobblestone. But if you have an S shape, that's a much more powerful leading line. If that S shape, you are lucky, and becomes like a zigzag that goes from left to right and then again left, right, then you have a really powerful leading line, and you have a journey throughout the entire photo. And the photos that I did, I was putting the focus point on the background and using the road as an S shape. As you can also see, the photos are really moody in editing. I didn't want to do a lot of editing. I just wanted to increase the contrast some more. That's why I
was placing myself in areas of darkness and photographing towards light, and then in post-processing I just increased the contrast between these two areas, and you have a visual journey, and you will always travel from darkness towards light. Light is going to be far more attractive than darkness to the human eye, to our attention.
When the forest is filled with sunlight, the only option you're having as a photographer is to concentrate on details, basically finding interesting things and isolate them. I mean, you can take a look only at this area of light and try to photograph it and have some dark background, which by contrast will become a lot darker. These wet leaves look really well. They form a really interesting pattern, and you can also photograph that. And you can also search for flowers or different shapes of leaves to include in your photos. The thing you need to do when you're photographing these kind of details is making sure that you have light on your subject and the background is darker. Now, because the dynamic range of the cameras is not equivalent with the human eye, difference in contrast is going to be a lot bigger between light and darkness, or subject and background, and you'll have the subject separated this way. It's an easy technique. You have to move a lot. As you saw, I was constantly trying to find a position from where the subject looked interesting and the background was in complete darkness, because if you have a little bit of light on the background, then you're gonna ruin the effect. There you have it. A rainy day turned into a sunny day. It's not a bad thing. It's the way nature is. You never have to be upset on how nature behaves, on how nature decides that the weather should be. You just have to accept it. You just have to adapt. Now, I hope you learned something from this short vlog. I hope it was useful for you. Thanks for watching, and keep on photographing, because it's the only way to get better. Bye bye.